So 2 weeks ago, the theme of my message was hope. At that time, I owned up to some confusion about hope, knowing that some of you shared that. I shared the notion that our resistance had probably arisen out of the sense that hope was an idea which smacked of personal powerlessness, like the way wishful thinking connotes daydreaming and inaction and takes us nowhere. In that message, I referred often to my study of the wonderful work of Buddhist teacher Tara Brach. She has helped me to shed light by shedding light on my confusion, especially when she differentiated between egoic hope and holy hope. Remember? Egoic hope is the kind that we hear the most about. As Unity people, it's understandable that we question this kind of hope because it contains elements of fear and lack and connotes a sort of magical thinking, like passively hoping for something specific we want, much the way a child waits for Santa Claus to bring the hope for a gift on Christmas Eve. But holy hope is different. Here's the definition we're working with. Hope is an abiding attitude of trust in our unfolding lives, in the basic goodness of people, and in the unlimited possibilities available in every situation. In part 2 of this message, I will again draw from Tara Brach's wisdom, along with a dose of my personal experience. So first, let's consider what it feels like to lose hope. Characteristics that I've either experienced or heard others talk about are profound sadness, pessimism, depression, withdrawal from normal activities, and or a sense of powerlessness or overwhelm. Of course, there are different degrees of hopelessness, ranging from temporary discouragement to deep despair. Whatever the degree, when hopelessness becomes chronic, it affects our worldview and our general outlook on life. Brach teaches that there are several major causes of hopelessness. First, a traumatic event. Second, a sense of severed belonging. And third, cultural trauma. So let's talk about these a bit. The first is pretty obvious. If we've gone through a major traumatic event, especially a violation of our home or person, abiding fear and hopelessness can result. So many of us have experienced something like this. Certainly, some of our community, certainly people in Florida who have lost everything they own, even family members, to the most violent hurricanes they've ever seen, are susceptible to hopelessness. It's common for people to feel brave and strong in the midst of a severe crisis, but later, when the immediate urgency has passed, find themselves dealing with sadness and depression. And by the way, one of the most difficult things about that is they may not connect that sadness and depression with the event once the time passes, all right? Trauma can be caused by a catastrophic event, but also by a chronic condition like emotional abuse. In my study of trauma, I was surprised to find that chronic trauma tends to leave the longest lasting scars, which affect our overall sense of well-being and our ability to approach life with a sense of optimism and personal power. I would be surprised if there is anyone in this room who has not suffered trauma. Many of you were here for Garland Landreth's presentations. When he made the statement, "Everyone in this room has PTSD," there was an audible gasp of recognition. One event I remember vividly was a rather small one, actually. I was newly married, and my husband and I were living in an apartment in Arlington, Virginia. We had a new baby, our first. I was not getting much sleep, and my husband was working very hard at his new job at IBM. Both of us were tired. One night I went into the bathroom for a good long soak in a hot tub. Settling down into the soothing water, I soon dozed off. Suddenly, I awoke with a start. What was it? Glancing upward, I saw a large hand creeping down the wall over my head. You see, I liked my baths really hot, but our small bathroom had a tendency to get unbearably steamy, so I had cracked the window on the wall beside the tub. What I had heard was the window being raised. You can imagine what happened next. My terrified screams brought my husband racing into the bathroom. Seeing a person running away from our building, he slammed the window shut, helped me up and into my robe, and then called the police. Okay, nothing really awful happened. Many people who have been through much worse, have they not? Then why is every detail of that night in 1966, 52 years ago, imprinted on my brain? The reason? Trauma. My worldview was changed. Never again did I feel safe in that apartment. Windows and doors were always locked. Fresh air never blew through that apartment again. Since this was not a chronic or total trauma, I eventually got over it, and life returned to normal. But never will I discount the power of a physical violation or invasion of personal space to alter someone's life. The second major cause of trauma is a little bit more obscure. Brock calls it severed belonging. This is as widespread a condition as personal trauma. Severed belonging usually arises from a childhood in which there is not sufficient affection or bonding with our parents. In chimps, when the mother is erratic in her care or love, the babies are prone to binge eating for comfort. In general, they are withdrawn and fearful. The same symptoms are known to show up in humans: addiction, chronic anxiety, and mistrust. Many people say they struggle with feelings of being left out, of not fitting in, not being able to bond with a social group, or difficulty forming close, intimate relationships. I have lost count of the number of folks who have shared with me that they felt like they were somehow born in the wrong family, that they knew from an early age that they did not see the world the same way their parents and siblings did. Many gay men and women have suffered tremendously, often in silence, from the sense of being different or flawed or not fitting in from the time they were children. For many, this has meant hiding who they really are. In their words, living a lie to protect themselves from rejection and to hold their painful loneliness at bay. But not just gay people struggle with this. Again, a small personal story. I remember vividly when I received my letter of acceptance to Unity Seminary. I was so excited, yet also kind of afraid to share the news with my family. Giving myself a good talking to about being authentic and acting like a grown-up. Now, mind you, I was 52 years old at the time. So I went to see my mom and shared the acceptance letter with her and was met with complete silence. Finally, I gathered up my courage and asked, "So, Mom, what do you think about my going to seminary?" Her response, "Well, you know, dear, this family is Catholic." Right. Mm-hmm. Of course, this severed belonging did not start at the age of 52. If it were not there, I would have felt no apprehension in sharing my good news with my family. But again, that memory of this moment with my mother is so vivid, I know it was traumatic. Perhaps just confirming what I'd always known, that I was not a real part of my family. Can you feel that? Can you sense that? I'm willing to bet you have stories like this of your own. Now, the final cause of hopelessness is fascinating and important to understand. The reason I'm telling you all this is because I'm seeing a lot of symptoms in a lot of people. I'm also seeing people who are somehow blaming themselves for not being on top of their game, for not feeling the way they ought to feel. They think they ought to feel as unity people. Cultural trauma may be the reason. Brock defines cultural trauma as a prolonged time of feeling unsafe in the world around us. She gives the example of African Americans who have lived in fear of rejection or bodily harm on an ongoing basis for decades. Cultural trauma cuts one off from hope, the same way personal trauma and severed belonging do. But because of our ability to adapt and adjust and rise above, it may be less obvious. The symptoms may even begin to feel like a new normal. But as with all forms of hopelessness, one is cut off from the energy needed to heal and move forward. I believe that many, many of us in this country are living through a time of cultural trauma. The ongoing onslaught of lies, deceit, incivility, meanness, suspicion, the deep rifts and division between people with different political viewpoints, and now between men and women, the soul trauma of witnessing the very values that have made us proud to be Americans being violated every single day, images of children in cages on our borders, of journalists tortured and killed, of school shootings. The political scene today is very toxic and very traumatizing. Some people say they don't feel affected because they don't watch the news. But I doubt that's the case. Think for a moment. We are energetic, spiritual beings. We are interacting with the energetic vibration around us at every single second. Whether we're conscious of it or not, our energetic core is under assault every single day. I have many conversations with people in which I hear symptoms of chronic discouragement and anxiety, a low-level hopelessness showing up as impatience, mistrust, worry, low energy, inability to feel true empathy, numbness, or chronic underlying sadness. In this environment, conflict is easily triggered because fuses are short. Reactions to small disagreements or discomforts are exaggerated. Physical symptoms are widespread, everything from aches to diseases. I personally know at this moment 3 people who have shingles. There seems to be a high degree of self-protection, some fear of being vulnerable that keeps people from taking risks with one another, like discussing controversial issues or working together to solve problems. Many people, many of us, seem hunkered down in our beliefs, no longer open to differing points of view, while at the same time hesitating to stand in our own truth, afraid to be authentic, even with friends and relatives. Remember the cause of cultural trauma: living in fear for one's safety over a long period of time. Fear is being used as a weapon every single day, and no one is immune. If we don't see this, we will not understand what we're really going through. We will not understand why we feel the way we do. So now, pause with me for a moment to consider the healing power of a community like this one here at CCU. A community where there is love and acceptance and safety. Where there is an invitation to be authentic, to share ideas and values. Where there is laughter and connection and tears and spirituality. Hopelessness is torment. A community like this offers not only relief, but the restoration of hope. Remember the definition of hope: an abiding attitude of trust in our unfolding lives, in the basic goodness of people, and in the unlimited possibilities available in every situation. This is what we teach as unity principles. Can you pause with me and just feel the gratitude for this? You do realize that most people who are struggling with the same family issues, the same ups and downs, financial and otherwise, the same hurricane losses, the same job problems as you and I are, do not have these tools at their disposal. They don't have an actual safe haven. Right now, I'm working with a woman in another state who tells me that although she belongs to a church and several women's groups, she is lonely. There is no place where I feel safe enough to reveal who I really am, she says, or what really matters to me, or what I truly believe. So, okay, if you, like me, ever find yourself suffering from some degree of loss of hope, what can you do about it? I offer more wisdom from Tara Brach. First, say to yourself, it is possible to heal. It's possible, no matter if things in the outer do not change, to feel free, to feel open, to feel optimistic, to feel happy. It is possible. Then ask yourself, what kinds of thoughts are regularly occupying your mind? Limitation, lack, perhaps worry? Do you have a tendency to live in the past? Do you think that nothing will ever be as good as the old days? Or are your thoughts often in the future, anxious about what might happen? You know, the what ifs. If so, the next step is to imagine. Use your mind and your imagination to imagine what it would be like if you were not entertaining those thoughts. Yes, I use the word entertaining on purpose. Like we so often invite them in and offer them a seat. Next, remember the things, activity, and people you love the most. What is so precious about them? What is right with your world right now at this moment? It's a good idea to write these things down and feel the gratitude. And when you do, I'm willing to bet you will notice a new or greater sense of aliveness and a rising of energy. Energy that's always been there, inside of you, at the core, available for you to use. Tara tells us that we have the ability through our prayer and meditation to tap into that core of aliveness that always lives within us, no matter what. But you may ask, as some people have, what if I don't know what I love? I don't feel like I love anything right now. Then Tara says, belong to the moment exactly as it is. Those thoughts of fear or lack or limitation or loneliness, be with them. Be with them with true compassion. Say to your own sweet self, I'm here with you, dear. Feel the tenderness and kindness of your own love and realize that this is you. This is what your highest self and my highest self are made of. Always present, always available. And finally she says, stay close to your community. Even when you don't feel like it, show up. Even when you think you're way too busy taking care of all the crisis or the overflow of stuff that comes out of crisis, stop, pause, and show up. It's important for us to realize that we're not the only ones feeling vulnerable right now. I would especially say, and Sepp and I have talked about this, and I hope you will in your family too, it's so important to be patient and kind with one another right now. This vulnerability, this sense of uncertainty is going on for the other person too. Come out of the bubble and realize that there are people around you who need your love as much as you need theirs. Bottom line, cut each other some slack. Everyone is on edge. EJ used to say, to love someone is to learn the song in their heart and sing it to them when they have forgotten. Take in the light you see in others and mirror it back to them. You and I have the ability and the support and the tools to do this. We come together here, whether it's to watch a movie or have a meal or come to service or a class, we come together and we fill up our well so that we can carry that light out into our families and neighborhoods and brighten the darkness out there. Spiritual hope opens us up to that which is timeless. It is the ability to see beyond the appearances of separation, discord, and fear. It recenters us in the moment and reminds us who we are in our highest self, that we have the power to change the way we're thinking and support others in changing theirs. You know something? It's really hard to be lonely when you know we're in this, whatever this is, together. There's a wonderful story I want to tell you before I close about the great philosopher and writer Kafka. When he was an old man, he used to enjoy sitting in the park. Often he would see a young girl playing there. One day she came over and sat down beside him. She was hugging her dolly, and so he asked her to tell him about it. She told him how much she loved that doll, how she took it with her every place she went. One day, the little girl came and sat on the bench beside him, and she was crying. I have lost my dolly, she said. I've looked everywhere and I can't find her. Kafka just put his arm around her shoulders and let her cry. The next time they met in the park, Kafka told her that he had had a message from her dolly. The dolly had told him that she had gone to travel the world. And she said to tell my girl not to worry about me. I'm fine. Every time the little girl came to the park after that, Kafka would give her another message from her dolly. Before long, Kafka, who was aged, became ill. Knowing his condition was serious, he wanted to see his young friend one more time. So he went to the park and bought with him a doll that looked very much like the one the little girl had lost. It had a note in its hand that said, "I'm back now, but as you can see, I am somewhat changed. My travels have changed me." The girl received the doll and held it close to her heart. Years later, the young woman took her old doll down from the shelf where it had lived for many years. She sat down on the bed and remembered that sweet old man in the park. Suddenly she notices that there is something caught in the folds of the doll's dress. It is another note. How had she missed it before? And here is what it said. "You may lose many people you love over the years, but the love will always return in new forms." Reminds me of another story about a park bench. This time it's an older woman who's sitting there when a disheveled man comes and sits down next to her. "How are you?" the woman asked politely. "Pretty good," the man says. "Actually, I just got out of prison after 25 years. "Oh," the woman says, "what were you in for?" "Murdering my wife," he answers, matter-of-factly. Without missing a beat, the woman looks up at him and says, "Oh, then you're single." Takes a lot to kill hope, you know what I'm saying? When we're willing to let go of the things we're holding so tightly to, and open to change, open to things just as they are, we may realize that there is something changeless that shines through it all. Love does not change. It may change forms, but it cannot be destroyed. This we can trust. This is the source and substance of hope. God bless you all.